latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Well, keep doing that. Chicago's Morning Answer. Good morning. Amjad Masad. He is a Palestinian gentleman who's in the tech world, and he was invited to be on Joe Rogan's podcast, which is fine. And I'm happy to talk to people that have critical perspectives of the state of Israel's policies or what should be the U.S.'s position in the Middle East. But I have a difficult time, as others do, when platforms are used to continue to spread information that has been debunked based on the manifest weight of the evidence. And that happened here again with Rogan, and so I want it to be addressed straight away because it shouldn't stand. So here's Joe Rogan and Amjad Masad talking about, generally speaking, the policy, but specifically this idea that Gazans are being targeted by Israeli military and prevented from receiving life-saving aid.
Technology. And
that whole thing where kicking people out of Palestine is such an inconvenient story today. When people are talking about Israel and Palestine and the conflict, they do not like talking about what happened in 1948.
Yeah, and I think it's important. I think for us to reach some kind of peace, which is really hard to talk about when you see what's happening in Gaza, even yesterday.
The people that were waiting for food got bombed. Yeah, it's insane, and no one wants to talk about it.
Right, but if you
do talk about it, you're anti-Semitic. Which is so strange. I don't know how they wrangled that.
It's been hard for me in tech because probably the only prominent Palestinian in tech that is talking about it, and so that's.
Do you get pushback?
Oh, of course. Lots of
what do
pushback.
people say to you?
Anti-Semitic.
How is it anti-Semitic?
I criticize the state of Israel. Our position, every moderate Palestinian that I know, their position is two-state solution. We need the emergence of the state of Palestine. And that's the best way to ending the occupation is the best way to guarantee peace and security even for Israelis.
Yeah, well, I think the two-state solution has been mothballed for the time being, given what happened on October 7th and all that's transpired since. Additionally, even though he presents as moderate, referring it to as an occupation is a bit of a tell. I'll cede my time in terms of responding to what Rogan said to Joe Lonsdale, great venture capitalist. No, Joe Rogan, this is a lie. Spreading blood libels is wrong. We know those giving the aid. They're attacked because they go around Hamas, which can't steal from it. It's Hamas's interest to spread this lie, and obviously not in Israel's interest for alternate aid sites to be attacked. Work the logic of it a little bit would be helpful as well. For more on this and other geopolitical matters, please be joined for our weekly conversation with Stephen Bucci, who served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official, now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's always my pleasure. Thanks for having me back on the show.
So we do have some developments in the region, positive developments. One, Hamas accepting the framework of a proposed new 60-day ceasefire, which would include a hostage release. We also have the Abu Sanad, who is the head of the West Bank's largest city, south of Jerusalem, saying we want coexistence. He also said that their plan is for Hebron to break out of the Palestinian Authority, establish an emirate of its own, and join the Abraham Accords. So maybe some positive developments towards cessation of hostilities.
Well, at least some recognition that the position of Hamas and the Palestinian Authority is not as unified across the Palestinian community as those two organizations would like everybody to think. There's also resistance forces inside of Gaza that are fighting against Hamas now, pushing back against them, trying to organize aid reception points that Hamas does not control, because everybody knows Hamas is stealing the food, selling it back to their own people, shooting individuals who try and resist them. And they even attacked some American connected aid workers here in the last week. This idea that, again, that somehow Hamas is leading this peaceful resistance against the evil Israelis is such nonsense. I'm not saying the Israelis are perfect. They do make mistakes. War is not as precise a activity as some of the pearl clutching folks on the left would dearly love it to be. But for goodness sake, it's so clear who the bad guys are in this situation towards the Gazan people. It's not just Israel doing it. It's Hamas is the problem. If Hamas would go away and release the hostages, all of this would cease.
Well, the other thing too about this the appeal to the two-state solution, or to go back and let's discuss the border drawing in 1948 all over again. But the two-state solution. So what do we have to work with on the two-state solution? You had self-governance in Gaza, and look how that turned out. So how is that a springboard for something as substantial as that, as opposed to either a rebuilding of Gaza under some joint Arab governance that includes peaceful pluralist Arab representation, or something else? But I just continue to hear this generic two-state solution because we've been saying it, and so many internationalists have been saying it for so many generations, that it sounds like that's some sort of moderate middle way. But it doesn't seem to me that it's really viable. Maybe it never was.
I don't think it ever was, as with hindsight. Heck, when they talked about it originally, it seemed to make sense. But that's sort of predicated on the fact that the Arab Palestinian people want to coexist with a Jewish state. They don't. The Palestinians who live inside Israel get to vote, get to worship, get to run for office and be representatives in the Knesset.
Yeah, right.
They have the best life of any Palestinians anywhere. But no, the Israel are the colonizers. They're the ones, this little tiny state, when the entire rest of the Middle East and North Africa and moving even towards Asia are all Muslim, but Israel's the problem. I'm sorry, it's a ludicrous argument. It's counterintuitive. It's counterfactual. And shame on Joe Rogan. He's a smarter guy than that. To just buy into it and enable that gentleman. I'm sure he's a great businessman, a great tech guy, but he's just parroting the most radical party line. He's just saying it with a smile.
Exactly, and you know what this is typical of somebody who's sort of is groping his way through things that he maybe hadn't considered very much until his podcast got popular, but it's always this is what the left gets you into doing, or these interests of illiberalism get you into doing. There's blame on both sides. I'm in a middle way. I'm against the bad stuff that the people I'm sympathetic to do, as well as I'm against the bad stuff that people I'm less sympathetic to. There's a sort of pernicious moral equivalency that creeps into the discussion. I think that's what you heard there, and there is no moral equivalency.
There is not. And if you look at what happened on October 7th, and you can draw any moral equivalency, though I know some people can, because you see idiots who say, no, rape is just resistance.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
come on. How in the world does any normal human being draw that kind of conclusion? That's not warfare. That's not, principled resistance. That's terrorism. And to see people still hanging on that and thinking that's okay, and look, don't even get me started on Israel's desire to minimize collateral damage. They have done more to minimize collateral damage than any military in history, including our own. And we make a pretty good effort to minimize that. But we don't send notes to the target areas saying, yeah, we're coming on Thursday at 9:15. If you're not a bad guy, you might want to get out of there. We don't do that, but the Israelis do.
So
it's crazy.
now, even though there's this progress with the Emirate of Hebron, saying they will recognize the state of Israel, and they have some conditions, of course, but they're moving in the right direction of peaceful coexistence, and the framework for a ceasefire agreed to in principle by Hamas. You also have Hezbollah's new leader, since Nasrallah was eliminated, saying that Hezbollah will not disarm until Israel withdraws its troops from southern Lebanon and ends airstrikes. My question to you is, does this get worse before it gets better? Because if you have, as you were describing, some people, some Gazans fighting back against Hamas, you've got this move coming out of Hebron, but you also have other factions that are digging in. And, the more they get closed in on, the more they're likely to try, like a wounded animal, to try to strike back in defense of themselves. And it becomes a little bit difficult to organize everybody along the same lines of peace, because you have some elements that are still striking. And so it creates a sort of, a whack-a-mole kind of dynamic for Israel in the West.
It does produce that whack-a-mole phenomenon, but with this kind of fight, as we found in 2 decades of trying to prosecute the global war on terror, it is a whack-a-mole. There isn't a simple solution. Let's go sign a treaty on the deck of the battleship in Tokyo Harbor. That's not in the cards. That's not the way this works. Even those who would like to take it even more extreme and say, well, let's just annihilate these guys. Okay, you can't. It's really hard to find every last terrorist in a group like this. And when there's some mixture with the population, and to be truthful, there's more than a little of that in the population in Gaza in particular, where, the people, we don't like what Hamas is doing, but boy, we're going to cheer like crazy when they do some of those bad things. There's some ambiguity there that has to be waded through as well. And perhaps the best we can do is encapsulate those organizations or those segregators, what I'm really talking about. Try and keep them from the major part of the population and winnow them down. But understand that's a long-term goal. And I think with the present administration in Israel, they're not going to stop. And they don't really give a rat's backside if Joe Rogan doesn't like it or anybody else. Now, it's helpful that the President of the United States would like to support Israel, but it's not a perfect thing. President Trump would like all this killing to stop as well. But how do you get there when one side really doesn't want to stop because their goal is the annihilation of Israel, or at least killing as many Jews as they can possibly find?
I wanted to get your assessment of the impact of Operation Midnight Hammer, the bombing of the Iran nuclear facilities. I just like saying Midnight Hammer. The New York Times reporting that Mossad and Israeli military intelligence had agents embedded inside Iran's most sensitive nuclear missile sites for years. The intel gathered far exceeded prior assessments, showing a vast and dispersed weapons infrastructure well beyond Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. So do we have like a real assessment of how much we regressed Iran's nuclear ambitions because of those strikes. There's been some arguments that it just delays it a few months, and then Trump repudiated that and threatened litigation surrounding that sort of reporting. But what is your assessment with the knowledge that we have about the impact that mission has?
Well, they have not yet released what a professional would say is the full battle damage assessment. And a lot of that is tied, particularly in facilities like these that are underground, that you can't just, point a satellite at and figure out whether it's been leveled or not. That's going to take harvesting that information from all those human intelligence sources that are like 99.9% Israeli. We've got to get that. That stuff is coming out. Some of those people are probably still working for the Iranians and going in and out of these facilities to try and get as good an estimate of that damage assessment as possible. It's going to take a little while longer.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that reporting by the New York Times, if it's accurate, I mean, you would think that we would have had a really good roadmap between Israel and the United States and the coordination of where to strike, how vast it is, that it wasn't sort of just indiscriminate, that we wouldn't have missed a piece of their program and the infrastructure if the intel was that good and built up over that period of time.
And I think we had that level of intelligence. I think it guided the strikes. The fact that, Israel has completely defanged Iran's defensive capability for, against air attack. We had Israeli jets just sort of cruising all over Iranian airspace at will for a couple of weeks. And our attack, the actual B-2 attack, had no resistance, no interference whatsoever. And I think they hit the targets that their evaluation said, these are the priority targets. This is what needs to be hit. The Israelis continue to remove missile launchers and other strike back capabilities. I think we did what we were trying to do, and I think they did it very effectively. Now, is it 100% effective? Again, we got to wait to see. I don't think there were any big misses that somebody knew about and said, oh gosh, we forgot to hit, this facility over here. They still have an entire, ability to develop bombs. I don't think there were any gaps like that, Dan, at all. And I think that eventually the evidence will be declassified and we'll see that. I think any reasonable person understands that Iran is no longer a threat and that the things that they're still saying are ridiculously, Baghdad Bob kind of propaganda, mostly for their own domestic consumption. They are not players any longer. Not completely eliminate the threat, because they still have very much asymmetrical terrorist kind of capabilities around the world that could still come into play, but that's not going to take down a country. They are no longer the giants that many people thought they were for so many years.
So Trump had a phone conversation with Putin on Thursday in which the outcome he said, I'm not happy about that. I don't think he's looking to stop the war. That was Trump's assessment. And to confirm that assessment, Putin launched one of the biggest drone and missile attacks on Kyiv the same night as his conversation with Trump. Is he trying to bait Trump into this, or what do you think Putin's play is here, and what should Trump's response be?
I think President Trump is slowly coming to the realization that Putin is not a legitimate negotiating partner, that he's not the guy to make a deal with, that he's an ideologue. He has a really warped sense of where he thinks Russia should be in the world, and he's kind of a bad guy. He's a killer and a crook. He is not a businessman of the type that Trump is used to dealing with. I'm not saying Trump can't get his measure and take good steps, but right now I think he was hoping for something that is turning out to not be achievable with Vladimir Putin at the other side of the table. So I think Trump is going to have to change that attitude and use that other methodology that he seemed to be able to use with the Iranians pretty effectively of, hey, here's your options. You don't take them, here's my options, and you're not going to like these. He has not come to that conclusion with Putin yet, or if he has not elaborated it in any sort of policy statement. So that one we're just going to have to wait and see. That's going to be an evolutionary change that's going to have to come in Donald Trump, because I think his hopefulness in this case is not being reciprocated by Vladimir Putin. You know, a lot of us recognize that Putin was that kind of bad guy already. Trump is now coming to that conclusion as well.
What would the you're not going to like it with respect to Putin look like, do you think? Would it be sending arms to the Ukrainians to defend and fight for themselves, or would it be actual U.S. engagement in Ukraine to repel the Russians?
I think that latter option is still a little far down the table. I don't see any appetite with President Trump or with almost the entire spectrum of the American populace and our leadership to deploy American troops into that particular conflict. Upgrading what we give them, how fast we get it there, that sort of thing, I think that's on the table and is probably being considered. But I don't see any short-term deployment of American troops there other than maybe in an advisory capacity or a training capacity. I don't think we're sending ground troops or even air power there in a big way. Maybe up the intelligence a little more, that sort of thing. The Ukrainians are still willing to fight, Dan, and they're very clear about that, but they do need the wherewithal to do it. We also have to overcome the suspicion that a lot of Americans have now that Zelensky has somehow been stealing all this aid. They don't realize we haven't really been giving them dollars. We've been giving them stuff. Mm-hmm. And, it's not stuff you could turn around and sell very readily without everybody in the world knowing it. But we have to wait and see. That's a political aspect that is very strong right now. The both libertarian and more isolationist chunks of both parties are sort of working together on that, and that's not helping Ukraine. So unless we're willing to roll over and say, sure, Vlad, you can have the whole Ukraine, who cares, which I think would be a really stupid policy. But short of that, resupplying them seems to be the most likely possible policy move.
Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official, now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thank you as always. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line. Now we check the headlines.
Good morning. It's 69 degrees in Chicago in the AM 560 The Answer newsroom. I'm Nikki Whaley. Israel has sent a team of negotiators to Qatar for talks with Hamas about a Gaza ceasefire.
The office of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says a team was sent Saturday to negotiate a truce proposal with Hamas, despite changes in the proposal requested by Hamas being unacceptable to Israel. The announcement came after Hamas